As a quick intro for everyone watching, this series features engineering and product leaders who are shaping how teams scale and make hiring decisions in 2025. Charles, your story stood out. From nearly 2 decades at KPMG building forensic technology platforms to now leading product strategy at X1, one of the most recognized names in e-discovery and in-place data search. You spent most of your career at the intersection of technology, forensics, and legal innovation, and now you're driving product strategy at X1. So, what drew you to X1 after such a long tenure at KPMG?
A great question. So I I I've spent most of my career building services and technology around e-discovery, and most of that time has been sort of in this kind of legacy business model of we're like the fire department for clients that have e-discovery matters, but in that we had a model where we need to acquire the data, and then we as a service provider would host that data and add value to it, consulting and technology and things where we're differentiating on that. But basic business model is really to get the data, keep the data, run it back to the customer, right? And as long as we're adding value, that model works. But I noticed, an interesting sort of pattern where that worked great for us service providers for a long time, but then, Microsoft got into the really hosted M365 business. So suddenly Microsoft also wants to get the data, keep the data, rent it back, and add value, through M365 services and all the things on their platform. Then our larger e-discovery players out there were also trying to, as they became cloud-born SaaS offerings, they also want to get the data, keep the data, run it back to the customer. And so there was this sort of, I'll say struggle for how many times is a customer going to pay for their data to be hosted and rented back to them. And so in that, I had known some of the X1 players back in the days when they, most of X1 came out of guidance software and Encase. So we were an Encase user. So I knew of them, and I knew one of the founders at X1, John Patzakis. And so, we were friendly over the years. And what I loved and drew me to X1 about this model was they were doing things in place. So the ability to take their technology, to take search and bring it where the data resides in a way that, was interesting, innovative, and disruptive, candidly. So they weren't playing the get the data, keep the data game. They were playing the let's sell good technology to customers and let them actually do some of that initial culling and discovering on their own, and then take maybe a reduced, more responsive data set and bring that into their normal e-discovery workflow. So we weren't trying to disrupt any of the larger players out there. We were trying to add a tool for our customers to be able to do data discovery and, data refinement and culling, sort of a targeted e-discovery approach, while data's still on the client's premise, in the client's tenant. That got me excited again. And the ability to leave a very large organization and join a small, very agile organization, which is, honestly, at the beginning of my career, how we all started, right? We all started small and we're iterating and meeting clients' needs. And that was sort of, fun times. And then things got, big and challenging, and challenges of scale and all that kind of stuff. So it was fun for me to take sort of rejoin a very innovative, disruptive player, sort of recapture some of those early, hands-on technology parts of my early career, and the rest is history. It's been a great transition, and joined a great team and having a lot of fun, delivering value for our clients.
X1 search in place approach challenges the old model of moving data into discovery platforms. What was the mindset shift for you personally in leading teams to build around that paradigm?
I love the the concept that, a small player with an innovative technology could equip clients to do things at step one, friction-free and cost-free, that historically they would do at step six after they had aggressed data and paid data volume taxes and probably consulting and a bunch of other things. So it's really for clients that were really, I think with the advent of legal ops and other things, they're clients that are interested in, trying to manage costs and manage how much data, leaves the organization. So really it was, clients that were interested in doing that, we were enabling them to do that and really know document counts and volumes very early in the process. And again, we're not trying to disrupt e-discovery players and existing e-discovery workflows. We're just trying to thin down the volume of non-responsive data that enters that pipeline and enters, all the volume taxes and things, right? So why not just lean that down? It's like, put your data on Ozempic kind of, right? And so, get more responsive data into the pipeline and be able to maybe knowing that with this enabling technology, you get multiple bites at the apple and those kind of things, why not enable clients to do that, right? You don't have to over collect, you don't have to move too much data. You can actually be a lot more precise and, iterate as you discover facts on a case. And sort of a surprise side effect to me that I didn't see coming in was when you're not moving all that data, you're incredibly well positioned for compliance and other kinds of use cases where you literally couldn't do that. It was just prohibitive to move that much data and create a stale copy of it in a service provider environment, to then discover facts that then are immediately stale because your data's moving underneath you, right? So we've had some really interesting use cases that I've delivered around, compliance, around, data separation in, cloud-based tenants, particularly M365, and other types of use cases that moving that technology left have enabled that I didn't even see going in, right? So it's been a real interesting, and that is what excites me about the opportunity, right? Just we're seeing all these use cases, clients are bringing us use cases, and yeah, of course we can do that, right? Once you've moved the ability to search closer to the data, we can solve all sorts of search problems, right? E-discovery or not, right? Compliance, data separation, asset reclamation, you name it. There are a ton of use cases that open up.
So e-discovery is one of those domains where innovation moves fast, but every change has to be defensible, auditable, and explainable. How do you lead teams to innovate under such constraints?
Yeah, yeah, that's another great question. So we are, I think we're incredibly well positioned to have, data under index management, if you will, close to where the data actually resides, if not actually in place. So we have clean data and metadata at scale, which is kind of the fuel for AI, right? So we are in, conversations with various AI platform providers and e-discovery providers, looking at a few different models where we would team to work together. One is, our clean data and metadata might fuel, a partnership with an AI provider. Another one is we're actually doing some AI innovation ourselves with some of the, I think as a software developer and technologist, the acceleration of AI is incredible. I mean, literally, every week, if not every month, something new changes. What particularly is of interest to me lately is you know, the kits, there's like OLLAMA and there's ML kit and there's lots
Mhm.
of these kits that are maturing incredibly fast. They're targeted at, my particular wheelhouse is C# and .NET. So I don't need to use, Python. I'm native in my C# language, and they're frameworks that enable access to a marketplace of AI models. And if another potential partnership, if you have an AI vendor or provider, and will fuel their data needs, that's a great way for us to partner. And then maybe some clients have their own AI teams in-house, and again, very bespoke models and teams, and they know what they're doing, but we're, again, data fuel for those models.
How do you balance hype versus practical use? Meaning making sure AI generally improves outcomes instead of just adding buzzwords to the roadmap.
Yeah. So we're not interested at bolting on generative AI GPT for GPT's sake, right? So what we're looking at are real use cases that bring value to our clients. Like, are we doing PII detection? Are we doing something interesting with sentiment? And I think that the great value is in these AI model marketplaces. There's like models that provide a useful function. So when you get the voice of customer and you get client needs in a real use case, and you can combine that with a model marketplace of useful things to know, and then through our unique approach and architecture, we can sort of be the enabling framework that makes all that happen. You get customer value, right? And we're not building it for building its sake. We're building it to deliver value.
You mentioned before that X1 isn't actively hiring at the moment, which is true for many companies this year. But that's often when the best strategic planning happens. As you look ahead to 2025, what skills or mindset will be the most valuable when you do scale your product or engineering teams again?
We've got a small and very capable team. So if we're trying to accelerate initiatives, which I know everyone is, right? So how do we do that? Are we going to do some kind of staff aug plan where we, pick skills or just extend skills that we currently have? Or are we going to try and do some sort of, A/B teams and do some kind of managed service? And I think those are the thoughts that sort of rattle around in my head. Next year, we might be interested in doing that. And the challenge is the challenge of scale. So if we're not going to go all in and do some sort of huge managed service thing that candidly would be disruptive to our team, who's very busy and very agile, how do we extend that effectively, right? And not, disrupt through onboarding a large team, and sort of impede progress that our team is making. So, how do you organically add value, bring new team members up to speed effectively so that, we're getting some value return quickly into that process? And then how do we phase that so maybe we could start smaller and get through that, learning curve, and then find a low friction way to scale that up and down as we need. And I think if there was a magic bullet answer to, how we would solve that problem, it would be that problem with a skills overlay. Like, certainly we're looking, C sharp, cloud first, AI aware, right?
Mhm.
And it may not be building models as much as building frameworks that host models. And how do you do that in a smart cloud first way, right? That is going to be mindful of, all the X1 secret sauce kind of things, and, e-discovery and compliance and the use cases that we mentioned.
X1's technology is built to handle huge challenge, accessing and filtering data across endpoints, cloud and on-premise systems without moving terabytes around. What are the biggest technical or architectural challenges your teams face maintaining speed, accuracy, and defensibility across that hybrid surface?
Yeah, so there's probably a 2 or 3 dimensional question, right? So there's data sources and cloud connectors we're going to support, or we need to support, based on our client needs. There's within those data connectors, they're not static, so they change. I mean, companies, bring enhanced capabilities, they deprecate other capabilities. So it's kind of like, you know, once you've solved the problem, you need to keep monitoring the problem because your cheese is moving. And so you have to have your teams able to have domain expertise to be aware of that and then be able to, compensate and roll that out at scale. Cloud scale is the scale, unto itself, right? Because you can get really large cloud scale M365 tenants. So being mindful of, data and being complete and thorough, being mindful of scale, and then being mindful of, user experience as we're handling these challenging problems of unstructured data and unstructured data at scale, how to simplify that use case for the end user, right? So there's a million details that we've handled and solved, and we don't need the user to pop the hood and look at the engine and see all the wires every time, right? So I think those are, how do we deal with complexity, do the hard work to make things simple for the user, and, play at scale in a cloud first game, and, deal with all the squeaks and bumps that just naturally, organically happen in this business.
As Chief Product Officer, how do you decide when to push innovation versus when to optimize reliability?
The most important thing, at least in my head, is need of current customers and where their journeys are taking them and us.
Mhm.
And then needs of pipeline and future customers and what we're hearing where their needs are taking them and us. And if you're like we're on this journey with our customers, the customer journey is really informing product roadmap and where we need to be to solve their problems of today and tomorrow, right? And the fun thing in this is all this is in motion constantly, and each client experience is going to be different. So we try and rack and stack and solve for the greater good, and that's really sort of the best reason we're agile, right? Because that greater good is like sailing, right? It's like I can't change the wind, but I can change the sails, right? And that's kind of what product management feels like in this world.
Do you think AI-assisted triage or intelligent pre-collection will become standard in e-discovery workflows over the next few years?
AI is going to permeate everything that we're doing. The current model of having to largely move all the data to the AI will work in some e-discovery use cases, but moving all the data to the AI is not going to work in compliance and other use cases. And I think there'll be a real value proposition to clients to run the AI earlier. And again, the evolution of the technology underneath these models is, it's moving all over the place incredibly fast. So I think, pay attention to everything because everything is moving, and where you can leverage value earlier and bring value to clients earlier. I think that's really going to be a huge differentiator for those that can wield it, right? So it's, I think we're in the river transversing the rapids, right? So it's like it's an interesting game, but be aware of everything, and where there's the opportunity to bring value to clients, right? And productize and field technology. I think you have to take early leaps in doing that and learn together with your customers, right? I think as long as you're customer focused and you're bringing value, those are early lessons that you can learn with the first movers amongst your customer base, and that'll inform how you productize and scale after.
You led large, complex teams at KPMG and now at X1. Over the years, what's the leadership principle that's remained constant for you, even as technology and markets are changing?
Two things resonate, like customer first. So stay close to the customer, close to engagement, delivery, and that experience, because you learn things, I think, through delivery and just being in the room with the customer and hearing the customer. There's been incredibly interesting cases where in my engineering mind, I think I'm going to go solve this big problem, and just being in a room with the customer says, well, that's great, but really this is a bigger problem. It's maybe 20, 30 degrees away from the problem I thought I was solving, and then a lot of times it's easier, right? So I had sort of overbuilt in my mind, as I'm planning out roadmaps and big architectures and say, wait a minute, it's like the value the customer actually wants. And they're sitting there telling me this because I'm in the room is this. Okay, well, why don't we do that first? Right. So there's opportunities to deliver more value faster. Listen to that, right? That will guide you. And, if you can stay agile, a lot of times taking that early delivery path will better inform and let you iterate in a more meaningful way to deliver more value, right? So it's almost like, don't hear the problem once and go build a castle someplace, build a lot of huts with the customer, right? Because that'll inform the castle you ultimately want to build, and it'll be a lot more informed.
How do you foster creativity and ownership in teams that work under such a tight compliance and audit constraints?
I think number one, you got to hire the right people that are curious and they stay energized. You build the right team climate, right? So people are interested in tech and evolutions in the technology, and then you map that to a customer problem. You say, wait, so you keep it real, right? Because I think if you don't want to do R&D for R&D's sake because you wind up with something you can't really leverage. Great tool, I can't use that tool. Okay, so if we're innovating and we're challenging each other to innovate around a real customer problem, and we keep it real and we deliver, learn, iterate, enhance, that keeps people engaged. Because I think from a self-as engineering point of view, there was an idea, an ideation became an implementation, became a delivery had value, and there was feedback. So it wasn't academic, it was practically applied with some real feedback attached to it. And that really excites the team members that you want to have on your team, right? And the culture that you want to build.
If you look ahead 12 to 18 months, what excites you the most about where e-discovery and data governance space is headed?
I think you can't minimize the impact AI is going to have and the rapid adoption of AI. And, I like, X1's position on how can we find value in that AI and enable clients to run AI earlier in the process. And I think that combined with, you know, ultimately it's probably be a hybrid. There'll be some AI we want to run early and some AI that we want to run, post-collection centralized, and just watching how that hybrid, it's going to be AI everywhere. So as it rationalizes to what AI runs early, what AI runs later, and just the general evolutions in AI, I think that's going to be incredibly interesting to watch, right? So it's not going to be so much the old model of we're going to overcollect and move a lot of dumb data and then enhance it and refine it and filter it and then, reduce that data to something that's more responsive and smarter. We're going to be able to do all those things that we used to do, embedded in AI and other kinds of models and classifiers and run those really early. And then to the point where I'm not going to say it's going to be real time, anytime soon, but it will happen earlier, and the ability for the data to describe itself and set flags will happen earlier and earlier in the process. So someday there might be a BI dashboard of, smoldering things to watch before they become problems for customers. And that's really going to be interesting. We can leverage all the stuff you learn reactively and apply it proactively at scale. That's the real game changer.
Is that one of the signals that you are watching that tells you the next wave of growth is coming?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we'll go through this iteration where we find that works, we apply it in real business, e-discovery and compliance, workflows. We'll take those lessons and being able to say, okay, we really did some valuable work here for this perimeter of data that we aggressed and focused on. Now, what if, we could, apply that writ large across the organization and live continuous data? And, for me personally, I'm looking at those kind of use cases very carefully.
Charles, this has been such a thoughtful and grounded conversation, exactly what I hoped for when we started this series. Your perspective on scaling under constraint, leading with foresight, and merging technical depth with business pragmatism really captures where the industry is heading. Thanks again for taking the time to share your experience and giving us the look behind the curtain of how X1 is navigating the next wave of AI and compliance driven innovation.